Hari Om. Jagat Karanam Karana Jnana Rupam Suradim Sukhadim Gunesham Ganesham Jagat Vyapinam Vishwavandyam Suresham Parabrahma Rupam Ganesham Bhajema Parabrahma Rupam Ganesham Bhajema. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste. Welcome to a new series, Disha, which is an inward journey to discover our inner strength and happiness through Bhagavad Gita. Any study, especially scriptures, will not sink in by listening just once. It requires repeated efforts to go through and revise what we learned again and again. Scriptures always say Shravanam should invariably be followed by Mananam and then Nididhyasanam. We are now in the midst of study of Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. We have completed chapter 11 and we'll enter chapter 12 called Bhakti Yoga from Friday, 1st April 2022. When we embark on such a long journey, though we feel that we have understood well for that moment, we tend to forget what we learned in earlier classes as we go further and further. So, as I mentioned earlier, there is a need for a thorough revision. In order to assist you in this Mananam, Paramvedanta has come out with this new series called Disha. You will have this revision session on every Monday, while on Fridays we will continue with the Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. Disha class will have one of our teachers explain a set of verses. This will be followed by a quiz time where we will display on screen a few questions with answers covering the topic of that day to put them in a nutshell. In our daily prayers, we chant many shlokas or stotras, but may not be aware of exact meaning of that stotra. Our prayer will be deeper and soulful when we know what we are praying. We have therefore designed a shloka time where one of our teachers will take one shloka per session and explain. It's always easy to understand the essence of scriptures when told through stories. Puranas, Panchatantra, Hitopadesha have followed this technique. Hence, we have designed spirituality through stories. Dr. Hegde sir himself will handle this part of the revision. I have only given you the outlines of this program, while Dr. Hegde sir will give a detailed description in his introduction. Hope you will find this series interesting and enjoyable. Today, Dr. Sundar is going to revise chapter 1, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, for us. But before that, it's shloka time now. I have the privilege of explaining today's shloka. Shloka of the day is Saraswati Vandana. Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada. Saraswati, Devi Saraswati, Namastubhyam, salutations to you. Varade, giver of boons. Kamarupini, fulfiller of wishes. Vidyarambham, commencement of studies. Karishyami, I am doing it. Siddhir Bhavatu, please bestow the capacity of right understanding. May to me, Sada, always. O Saraswati, salutations to you. O giver of boons. O Kamarupini, I am going to start studies. May success be mine always. Small kids are taught this shloka when they start learning at home. Key words here are Saraswati, Kamarupini, and Siddhi. Saraswati, the words Sarita, river, Sarovara, lake, Saristupa, reptiles, Sarpa, serpent, all have the same root to flow, that which flows. Water flows, river flows. Similarly, knowledge also flows. Hence, goddess of knowledge is named Saraswati. The other reason suggested is that in the Vedic times, the river Saraswati had a lot of activity going on along her banks. Centers of learning abounded. With time, the river's name itself became synonymous with knowledge. The word Kamarupini, next word, can be understood in three ways. First, one who has a desirable form, Rupa. She is beautiful indeed. The second meaning is one who takes any form, Rupa, that she desires. She is also one who takes form as the devotee desires. That is, in whatever form you need learning, she appears in that way for you. The third way to look at it would be one who gives form, rupa, to one's desire, kama. Siddhir bhavatu me sada. Siddhi means the success. May the right understanding bestow on me. I am commencing my learning. Learning here may mean literacy, knowledge, music, science, driving, cooking, samskara, values, Brahma Vidya, and whatnot. May Goddess Saraswati bless us all. Now, I request Dr. Hegde sir to give a brief introduction to Disha and the day's program. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Venkatesh, for giving a nice introduction and also explaining this beautiful mantra. Sada Shiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. As explained already, what is the need for Disha? Disha is an acronym, discovery of inner strength and happiness through the Bhagavad Gita. We have completed 11 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. The 12th chapter is a very important chapter dealing with bhakti, and we have some very beautiful verses dealing with the nature of a person who's God realized, very similar to the Sthita Prajna portion. After the 12th chapter, we have a series of chapters, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, with very profound verses, and it is important that we go a little slow. We will not be able to study more than 5 verses in detail per week. So we will restrict our verse by verse study of the Gita from now on to once a week. It so happened that I had to attend a Bhagavad Gita retreat conducted by Swami Chidananda ji, and as we went back to some of the earlier verses, I realized even though we had studied the Bhagavad Gita so many times, so many important verses looked very new to me. I had forgotten them. So that is why the importance of going back on our study. That means if you just go by your own, by listening, you get only about 25%. But if you revise, it comes to another 25%. And if you're able to teach to somebody, it comes to 75%. And over a certain period of time, this learning becomes 100%. And that is why Bhagavad Gita should be not only studied, to be revised, you attempt to teach it to somebody, and over a period of time, you will get 100%. Now, in long study programs, like in medicine, in neurosurgery training program, what we realize is whatever topics we have studied earlier, there is a tendency to forget. But in an academic program, there is an examination. And because of the examination, a student is forced to revise. And when you revise, many of the learnings come back very quickly. To help us in this, as part of the revision process, we will have a teaching quiz. In each session, we will not only have one speaker dwell on important aspects of the Bhagavad Gita. We cannot go verse by verse, but we will take some important aspects, followed by a teaching quiz on that particular day. Finally, the question is, why are we studying the Bhagavad Gita? Are we in for some form of a scholarship? Certainly not. The study of the Bhagavad Gita is only an excuse for self-discovery. There is no greater manual, there is no greater mirror. So the Bhagavad Gita is only a mirror held by the teacher in such a way so that I can use that mirror not to see my body, not to see my mind, but use it to see, be embodied who is beyond this body, beyond the mind, and thereby help to discover my true nature. In addition to studying the Bhagavad Gita, through Disha, we thought parallelly we will study Tattva Bodha. Tattva Bodha in medical terminology would be like studying anatomy, physiology, the fundamentals of medicine. Those who study the fundamentals, or those whose fundamentals in the medical curriculum are very strong, the superstructure becomes very good. So too in Vedanta, there is a text called Tattva Bodha which deals with various technical terms so that in any science, if you're able to be very clear about what is Atma, what is Hiranyagarbha, what is Prajna, what is Ishvara. So in our discussions, if these things are very clear, these fundamental topics, and Tattvabodha by itself also helps us in the process of self-inquiry. And therefore, any number of times that we study the fundamentals, it becomes very useful. And so parallelly in our quiz, and each of these teachers today, because Dr. Sundar has got a very elaborate topic, he will be covering the entire chapter 1. We will not be attending to Tattvabodha topics, but in future classes, we will intersperse Tattvabodha along with important areas of the Bhagavad Gita. What is the objective of Disha once again? I recently had to speak to a school graduating ceremony where students of the 10th and 12th were graduating. And I was thinking, what is the best way to begin? And the statement or the opening lines came like this: you are no longer school boys or school girls now, but young men and women with a purpose. Now, that is exactly what I need to say to each one of us, that we are no longer beginners in Vedanta. We need to see ourselves as senior students of Vedanta. Don't feel hesitant of that title. From now on, we have been in the study for quite some time. So let us call ourselves senior students of Vedanta. And as senior students of Vedanta, we have to shift our gears from the traditional triangular format of Jiva Jagat Ishvara. From now on, I don't blame anybody for the difficulties in my life. I don't seek God for solution to all my problems. I have to shift gears. And that gear shifting is a big jump. I have to see myself as Atma. The teachers have already declared to us time and again, Tat Tvam Asi. You are that. You are already that which you can possibly be. And after some reflection, we need to claim I am Atma Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi. That is my true nature. I am already that. I means not this body mind, but the embodied who's using this body mind to speak. I am of the nature of Parabrahma, Paramatma. And everything else that I see and experience is of a lower order of reality. And the lower order of reality cannot really affect me. And this should be something of my conviction. Now, when you move from triangular format to binary format, with the sound founding of Jiva Jagat Ishvara, with Guru Shastra Upadesha, we move to confidently to the binary format. But when there are difficulties, when there are moments of crisis, we will have a tendency to fall back. Let us guard ourselves that, this is going to be my commitment. I commit to be in the binary format because moksha is possible. And moksha or Paramapurushartha, which is my birthright and I'm working for, is possible only in the binary format. In order to go higher, we have to learn to relinquish something. A bird got something which was sought out by so many birds. And the higher it flew into the skies, a swarm of other birds came to attack it. So the only thing it had to do to save itself was to let go. Now, what is that which I have to let go? If I have to go from the triangular format to the binary format, I have to let go the importance that I normally give to my body, to my mind, to my family, to my work, to my possessions, because I know these are useful, but they are relatively insignificant compared to my true nature. And therefore, I need to give much less importance to all these which tend to clasp me. What is clasp? The more I have a sense of controllership on all these 5 anatma aspects, the greater is the anxiety. And if you see our prayers, all our prayers are strengthening mamakara and ahankara. And therefore, a shift to the binary format includes no special prayers, no sakama prarthana, no going to a place of worship with Bhagwan, please do this for me. As long as I'm requesting, what am I asking? I'm asking in relation to my profession, in relation to my possession, in relation to my family, or to my body, or to my mind. All these things of anatma, I'm seeking importance to, and therefore ahankara and mamakara get propagated. What do we pray then? Thank God for the Guru, thank God for the Shastras, thank God for me, for being able to declare, I am Atma Brahma. What greater prayer can they be? And once you've been able to declare this prayer, my only prayer is well-being to everybody. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha. And also to ask for that strength to be able to accept whatever God gives me, and not to move from the path that I have chosen. Now that I have moved to the binary format, I'm not going to fall back. There is an interesting story that I would like to share. I've shared this story many times before, but this story is relevant in the context of Disha. There was a certain spiritual master who had 2 disciples, and he had to know who among them is going to succeed him. So he gives each of them an envelope and tells them, you have 24 hours time. And in 24 hours, I want you to destroy it, but destroy it in a place where there is nobody. The first person took the envelope very seriously, went to his room, ensured that the room was dark, all the windows were shut, nobody was there. And when he was absolutely certain, he lit a match and destroyed it, reported to the teacher. The second person comes to the teacher with the envelope 24 hours later and tells the Lord, tells his Guru, Maharaj, I had a problem. You said, please don't destroy it destroy it in a place where there is nobody. The problem I had was wherever I went, I was there. Reflect on who is this I who has been with you since your childhood, in your waking, in your dream state, Balya, Dishu, Jagrata, Dishu, Sarva Avastha, in all your avasthas. While something is constantly changing, there is this upper bird or higher bird in us who is the witness, who is watching, who never grows old, who never undergoes any change. This shift from the lower bird to the higher bird is the shift from the triangular format to the binary format. Ultimately, remember this all the time. All the time, we need to have these 5 principles whenever we are in Disha. And that, remember our true nature, as Swamiji has declared, I am of the nature of eternal, all-pervading consciousness. So this is the nature of Atma. I am Atma, Brahma. I am eternal. I am all-pervading consciousness. I am the only source of permanent peace, security, and happiness. The world around me can give me temporary peace, security, and happiness. Welcome. But whenever I want permanent peace, security, and happiness, I discover it in myself. This Atma Tattva enlivens my body, and through this body, I'm able to not only experience the world, I give existence to the whole world. Because I'm of a higher order of reality, anything that happens to my body, mind, to my possessions, to my family, my profession, anything that happens to the world around me shall not affect me. It shall not affect me too much. I do get affected, but you remember the FIR, I will recover. Finally, like Lord Dakshinamurti, keep your right leg always on the ground to remember this teaching all the time. Because if I forget this, life becomes a burden. And whenever I remember this, life becomes a samsara. Life becomes a blessing. Now, this is the objective of Disha. With this objective, let us begin our revision classes. And we will have Dr. Sundar, who will, in a short span of 30 minutes, give us whatever is the essence of chapter 1. Over to you, Dr. Sundar.
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The Bhagavad Gita is a glorious, liberating wisdom which was imparted by Jagadguru Lord Krishna to Arjuna. Arjuna was not any ordinary person. Mahabharatam describes Arjuna as Dhanurdhara Partha, means he was fully loaded, means that he was highly accomplished, employed even by Indra to vanquish his foes, highly skilled. Many among us can identify with Arjuna in terms of the accomplishments we have in our lives and in terms of the skill sets that we have. Although Arjuna was as highly accomplished as this, in the middle of the Kurukshetra war, when his skills were the most needed, he falters. He is unable to deliver the purpose there. The reason given at that point was Arjuna suffered from samsara, which is an emotional problem. For many of us, the question could be that I have good emotional well-being at present. Do I need to study the Gita? Do I need to study the first chapter at all? Great masters say that this emotional problem of samsara is universal. So it is relevant for each one of us. How is it so? Let us see in this subsequent slides. In this next slide is arranged the range of steps in which Arjuna goes through the first and the second chapters of the Gita before he becomes a student, a Gita student from being a soldier. Most of us will have to take these very steps. So in the first step, as I already said earlier, one may feel that I am happy right now. This is a situation where we are unaware of the hidden, unmanifest samsara within us. Arjuna was like this as he came to the battlefield. Very soon, he suffers samsara. He becomes aware of this samsara, and he longs to get out of this samsara for freedom. And naturally, there are self-efforts initially which are misdirected, which do not succeed. And by the beginning of the second chapter, these self-efforts become into doubt. He then feels helpless. He then surrenders. Fortunately for him, the greatest master was right in front of him as Lord Krishna. Let us now focus on the first two steps to understand in concept what is samsara. We identify that we all have a sense of incompleteness, a sense of lack of fulfillment, and we all identify with the fact that we interact with objects, situations, relationships outside of us and derive this fulfillment or completeness. So there is this mutual relationship between my wants and the objects, situations, relationships which are outside of me, which frequently fulfill this want. Therefore, my life is happy, being dependent on outside circumstances. This exactly is what is the situation called happy in samsara. This is unmanifest samsara. One needs to be wary of this. One cannot take comfort in this situation because, as we see in this next slide, the relief or the comfort of that external object, situation, or relationship is not permanent. At some point, there is this separation between my wants and the ability of the outside world to fulfill my wants. This is described by the word viraha in Sanskrit, which means separation. The outside world is not dependable. It is like a cardboard chair. It looks good, but one cannot sit on it. Viraha then pushes one down the cascade of samsara, which Vyasacharya beautifully depicts in this first chapter as the cascade of raga, shoka, and moha. As we see in this next slide, this need not be the compulsory situation for us all the time. There were great role models. As is seen in the diagram, viraha affected equally Krishna and Arjuna in Mahabharatam. But we can see the dejected Arjuna there, yet the cheerful Krishna. Similarly, in Ramayana, viraha affected equally Rama and Lakshmana. And we see the cheerful Rama in the company of the dejected Lakshmana. How did this come about? Advaita, Vedanta, principles which are there in the Bhagavad Gita act as a Moksha Shastra, which is opposed to Samsara. To put it simply, at the end of the Gita journey, one realizes that in reality, there is no second thing to develop viraha. There is no separation because there is no second thing. Before going to that, let us understand samsara. As we see in this next slide, there is one more reason why we should be wary of samsara. There are two important steps put by Gita, which is karma yoga, jnana yoga, and then one is free. Samsara derails at both the steps. I am not able to take to karma yoga because samsara robs me of my free will. The raga, shoka, moha, which is there, prevents me from exercising Ishvara Arpanam and Ishvara Prasada. If there is no karma yoga, definitely there is no jnana yoga. Then there is no spiritual journey. Therefore, I need to be careful with samsara. So I need to learn from this chapter, from what Arjuna went through, so that I can be more alert. With this background, let us now see what is the purpose of the first chapter in this next slide. So the first chapter, as has already been mentioned, is primarily about presenting the universal problem of samsara. Like any other scriptural teaching, the teaching of Moksha Sastra happens as a samvada. Therefore, for samvada, there is a need for a teacher and a student. Therefore, the first chapter introduces the great teacher in Krishna and a sincere student in Arjuna. If a student and teacher have to come by together, there should be a situation which should arise where they come together. Therefore, Vyasacharya presents the context to the Gita in the initial part of the first chapter. We see that Itihasa is one of the scriptural layers in our vast traditional scriptures. Itihasa comprises of history in which the teaching of the Vedanta is imparted. There are two scriptures, Mahabharatam and Ramayana. Mahabharata itself has 18 books or 18 parvas, which comprise of 100 sub-parvas. The sixth such book is called Bhishma Parva. In this next slide, we will see that this Bhishma Parva comprises of the 4 sub-parvas between 60 and 64. And in these 4 sub-parvas, there are 122 chapters, of which the Bhagavad Gita comprises the chapter numbering 25 to 42. The Mahabharatam, as we see in this next slide, is the story of 2 warring cousins. The Kauravas were on the adharmic side and the Pandavas were on the dharmic side. The dharmic Pandavas try all non-violent means in Sama, Dana, and Veda. When those do not work, they are now forced to take to the Kurukshetra war to re-establish Dharma. The Gita begins with the first verse said by the blind king Dhartarashtra. Since he is blind, Vyasacharya offers Dhartarashtra to give divine vision. Fearful as he is, he asks Vyasacharya to give the vision to Sanjaya. Therefore, Sanjaya is fortunate to directly view the happenings at the battlefield. In the next slide, we see Sanjaya opening the verses initially where he narrates King Duryodhana approaching Dronacharya and listing the warriors among the opposite side. So here we see the number of warriors he is listing, and he mentions here that they are equal to Bhima and Arjuna. In this next slide, in the subsequent verses, the narration by Sanjaya is of Duryodhana now listing the warriors in his own side. We see an interesting depiction of Vyasacharya of the lack of confidence in Duryodhana. Focus on these words. Asmakam balam aparyaptam. Our strength is inadequate, says Duryodhana. And then he says, Etesam balam paryaptam. Their strength is adequate. Factually, Pandava army consisted of lesser warriors than the Kaurava army. In addition, the Kaurava army had the teacher Dronacharya who knows the plus minus points of every student. The Kaurava army also had Karna, the eldest Pandava. So it would appeal to common sense that he should be brimming with confidence, yet he makes this statement that their strength is less. So Swami Paramarthananda ji brings this comment that where there is no dharma, there is no Ishvara Anugraha, and how much ever material wealth one may have, he will certainly not have confidence. So it appears Bhishma was aware of this lack of confidence, now makes a lion's roar and he blows his conch. And then soon there is the depiction of conches being blown by individual Pandavas, which have been beautifully named by Vyasacharya. And in this next slide, soon there is description of the conches being blown by other kings on the Pandava side. We have seen that Duryodhana lacked confidence. Now there is a beautiful poetic depiction that this tumultuous sound pierced the heart of the Dhartarashtas. Now, in addition to lack of confidence, he also has fear. In this next slide, there is an interesting turn of events. Arjuna naturally would want to see who is assembled there so that he can decide with whom he has to fight. So he raises his bow and he commands Lord Krishna to take the chariot to the middle of the battlefield. In this next slide, so Lord Krishna would then take to the middle of the battlefield. And it's an interesting expression, Dhartarashtrasya dhurbuddhe, which is there in this 23rd verse. So he is seething with anger. He is addressing the Kauravas as the evil-minded, adharmic sons of Dhartarashtra. This is important for us to note that Arjuna for several years has prepared for this battle. He wants to right all the wrongs done by the Kauravas. He wants to establish dharma. He has come with this clarity of mind to the battle. And yet, because he is down with the problem of samsara, he moves from reason to relation. As we see in this next slide, Lord Krishna very cleverly positions the chariot right in front of Bhishmacharya and Dronacharya amongst all the Kauravas which were assembled there. Cleverly, he precipitates the problem of samsara. So here we can see the viraha or the separation setting in. He sees Bhishmacharya, Dronacharya not as the adharmic people, but he starts to see them as his closest relation. It is in this manner that viraha or separation brings about samsara universally. As we see in this next slide, this samsara eventually converts this valiant soldier in Arjuna to a dejected samsari who has thrown his bow and arrow, the worst thing that can happen to the Kshatriya warrior. So remember, he was no ordinary person. So if it can happen to Arjuna, it can certainly happen to us. In this next slide, there are several definitions of samsara that we know. I would not go to them individually. I will focus on the last one, being happy due to favorable circumstances. Let us be alert and watchful. Being happy due to favorable circumstances is also samsara. It is called as happy samsara. Let us now go to the next slide. Let us see what is the interpretation of Adi Shankaracharya on this first chapter. It is generally believed that he did not give a teaching till the 11th verse of the second chapter. But the truth is, although he did not give a verse-to-verse commentary on the first 57 verses of the Gita, he did make a bhashyam, which is popularly known as Avatarika Bhashyam. He says that it is not important to know which kings were there and who blew which conch shell. It is important to understand the extracted meaning of these first 55 verses. And Adi Shankaracharya says that the extracted meaning, which is relevant for us, which is important for us to understand the Gita, is Atma Ajnanam Samsarasya Karanam. Swamiji, Pujya Swami Paramarthananda ji, analyzes and says that samsara is the 7th step in the cause-effect cycle which comes out of the statement Atma Ajnanam is Samsara Karanam. Let us see how it is that. Atma Ajnanam means I am unaware of my Atma Swarupam. That means I have identified with the body-mind complex. That means I have Ahankara now and Mamakara. So the second step is, due to this, I develop Raga, attachment. Soon, inevitably, Shoka and Moha follow. This emotional inadequacy pushes me to perform karma, and they thereby generate punya papa. They add to the sanchita bag and they result in punarjanma. And again, there is sukha dukkha anubhava. So the extracted understanding, so Adi Shankaracharya gives is Atma Ajnanam is Samsara Karana. In this next slide, let us now try to understand what we have seen as samsara through the actual verses which are depicted by Vyasacharya. So in this 27th verse, Tan samikshasa kaunteya sarvan bandhun avastitan. So we saw the word dhurbuddhe in the 23rd verse. Now, within a matter of 4 verses, he has moved from dhurbuddhehe to bandhuhu. And then in the blue font, in these verses are several words which show that he has moved from reason to relation. Swajanam, Swajanam, Sambandhina, and Swajanam. So this is the depiction of raga, which is a problem of the emotional mind. Raga in this verse is indicated by the word kripaya. Now, kripaya normally means compassion or love. So how to say that the usage of word kripaya is raga and not compassion or love? For this, the Mimamsha Shastra helps us. Look at the words associated with kripaya. The words paraya and avistaha means great. He is overwhelmed with great kripaya. Compassion or love never overwhelms anybody. So therefore, the understanding is this is raga and not compassion. Also, Mimamsha Shastra shows us that when we see the previous verses, there has been a sudden shift in the state of mind of Arjuna. This kripaya is impulsive when we see the last previous verses. Compassion is never impulsive. Again, by Mimamsha Shastra, if you see the verses which follow this, we see that Arjuna ends up doing adharma. Compassion never leads to adharma. With all this, we can see that the word kripaya is raga and it is not love or compassion. We now go to the next slide. Inevitably, raga leads to shoka. Attachment leads to sorrow. And it is in the very next line, Visidan idam abravit. Visidan refers to the sorrow. Sorrow initially manifests in the mind, it then flows to the organ of speech and the body. We often see angry people, initially the anger is in the mind, then it flows to the words and then they become red. So that is the kind of depiction. The lines in this blue font depict this very flow. So in this cascade of raga, shoka and moha, which is the syndrome which is representative of samsara, as is described by Vyasacharya in this chapter, moha is an inevitable consequence of raga and shoka. So the problem of raga and shoka belong to the emotional mind. Whereas, interestingly, as the problem becomes more, moha is a problem of the rational intellect. He makes several misjudgments. He sees right as wrong and vice versa. He sees dharma as adharma and vice versa. So these are the judgment errors he does. He says war is not for dharma. It is for kingdom and pleasures. Let us not do it, therefore. Then goes to the extent of saying by destroying these worst sinners, we will get papam. So these are the judgmental errors which he does. As we see in this next slide, the problem of the intellect that he suffers is so intense that he is now including even Krishna as saying we in these verses. We are clearly seeing this dosham. Why should we not withdraw from this war? We have resolved to commit a great sin. Interestingly, Lord Krishna doesn't rebut at this point. He is quietly observing. The reasons why he does that will be explained by Divakar in the next class. Another interesting thing is that, as I have written here, there is a false clearing of confusion when the intellect joins the mind. We have to understand this. He came to this war with a very clear intellect that I am a Kshatriya warrior, I have to right the wrong, I have to re-establish dharma, and all these are adharmic people, therefore they have to be eliminated. But then viraha sets in, there is raga and shoka. At that point, there is a kind of a confusion. His intellect reminds me of Swadharma, that he has to go and vanquish these people. Whereas the mind, which is now afflicted with raga and shoka, tells him, don't do that. These are your own relation. So there is confusion. But as moha sets in, now the intellect, which has become defunct because of the problem of samsara, it now joins the hands of the emotional mind. There is a false sense of clearing of confusion. He says in those verses, I was not clear before coming to the war. Now I am very clear. This situation has opened my mind. We should not be killing them. I should withdraw. I should take to sannyasa. So this can happen to us too. So just because I feel I have clarity doesn't mean that I am not suffering from samsara. It might be that I am having delusion and there is this false clearing of confusion. Vyasacharya takes pain in putting so many verses to describe this deluded intellect of Arjuna, where Arjuna puts on his own theory justifying why this war should be quit. It appears very convincing, this argument, which is completely demolished by Lord Krishna in the beginning verses of the second chapter. We need not go through this 8-step downward spiral of war, because there is no intention to teach. All that is there, all that Vyasacharya wanted here is to be alert for us that the deluded intellect can be very convincing. Don't fall into the trap of the deluded intellect. That's all was the message Vyasacharya wanted to convey in this downward spiral of war. Arjuna is so deluded in the 46th war, a Kshatriya warrior as great as Arjuna is saying, if they come and kill me, it is for my own good. So in summary, Atma Ajnanam Samsara Karanam was Adi Shankaracharya's conclusion. And the entire Gita is the opposite of that. Atma Jnanam is Moksha Karanam. As we see above the yellow line, with regard to physical health, I have the choice of building my immunity, changing my surroundings. But with regards to my emotional health, I may not have the choice of changing the surroundings. I have to completely rely on building my inner strength. This building of inner strength is the subject matter of the entire Gita. It is this that we are trying to do mananam in this special course, Disha. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sundar. That was an excellent summary of the entire first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita without missing any details. Very beautifully brought out. And fortunately, this is recorded and it will be an excellent source for anybody who wants to see what is the importance of the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. We will now have a teaching quiz, and I will request Venkatesh Prasad to conduct this quiz. Venkatesh, please.
Thank you, sir. Now it's quiz time. Let us cover the entire topic of Dr. Sundar's presentation in a set of questions which will put all the explanations in a nutshell. We'll go to the next slide, sir. All our scriptures use the question and answer technique to drive home the point. After listening to the presentation of speakers, in order to consolidate the learning by Shravanam, an effort is made here to cover the entire topic of presentation through question and answer to help Mananam. Hope you will enjoy this. Now we'll see the questions. Question number 1. Shankaracharya writes no commentary on the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as there is no real teaching here. Then, what is the purpose of chapter 1? A. Introduction of context, background. B. Introduction of Guru and Shishya. C. Introduction of the basic human problem of samsara bhava roga through Arjuna's samsara varnanam. Let's go to next question. Question 2. Why doesn't Krishna teach in chapter 1? Krishna is allowing Arjuna to empty out all his anguish. Arjuna's feelings overwhelm him and is not yet ready to listen to Krishna. Question number 3. Why is Gita called the Moksha Shastra? Bhagavad Gita is a remedy to our problem of samsara, to get freedom from samsara, hence called Moksha Shastra. Question number 4. Samsara is a combination of 3 diseases. What are they? Are they related? Raga, attachment, emotional and psychological. This is covered in verses 26 to 28. Shoka, sorrow. This is covered in verse 29 to 35. Moha, delusion. Verse 36 to 47 speaks of this moha. You can see Arjuna's talks in all these slokas referring to these diseases. Yes, the 3 diseases are definitely related. Raga leads to shoka and it leads to moha. Next question will go now. Question number 5 says, Arjuna mistakes attachment to love. What is the difference between attachment and love? No, attachment is not the same as love. We'll see the differences. Attachment is based on selfishness, whereas love is based on selflessness. Attachment in the form of taking, love is in the form of giving. Attachment is conditional, love is unconditional. Attachment is born out of weakness and incompleteness. Love is born out of strength and completeness. Attachment leads to delusion. There is no delusion in love. Attachment leads to adharma and love leads to dharma. Attachment is a sign of bondage, whereas love is a sign of freedom. Attachment leads to shoka and moha, and love leads to ananda and moksha. Let's move on. Question number 6. How does Arjuna's attachment, that is raga, hinder his judgment, moha? Arjuna, because of his clouded intellect, moha, thinks of this dharma yuddha as adharma yuddha, adharmic yuddha. He also thinks of running away from the battlefield and take up sannyasa. Sannyasa for him is an escape route. Question number 7. Dhritarashtra speaks only once in the whole of Bhagavad Gita, but you can see this strong attachment in the way he phrases his question. What is that? In the first shloka of Bhagavad Gita, he uses the word mamakaha in verse 1. Mamakaha is my people. When he says, what are they doing? My people and Pandava. Pandava is different and Kaurava is mamakaha, my people. This shows the strong attachment in him. Question number 8. Even though Kaurava army is superior, both quantitatively and qualitatively, still Duryodhana feels his is a weaker side. What psychological point is learned here? Dr. Sundar explained this with numbers. 7 Akshohinis in Pandavas, 11 Akshohinis in Kauravas. Let us see the answer here. Where dharma and bhakti is lacking, then inner strength, confidence and security will also be lacking, which is the case of Duryodhana. Material strength is there, but no spiritual strength. He is having a feeling of insecurity. Ishvara anugraha is missing as there is no dharma. That is why the fear of aparyattam faces Duryodhana. Next question, sir. The word atha carries great significance in Vedanta. Which verse in chapter 1 begins with atha and what is the significance? Chapter 1, verse 20. Atha vyavasthitan drishtva dhartarashtran kapidvajaha. Swamiji give lost a lot of importance to this word atha. Atha means then, signifies a turning point, a change either in topic or context. Here, Arjuna's strong attachment, raga, is revealed. Question 10. Arjuna initially had a clear intellect as to the purpose of the war. Later, his intellect gets clouded. What two words indicate his state of mind? Why? Let us see the two words. In verse 23 of chapter 1, he uses the word durbuddhe, dhartarashtrasya durbuddher yuddhe priyachikirshavaha. He calls the Kauravas evil-minded. His mind is clear about this being a fight between dharma and adharma, and not a fight between relatives and friends. But within 4 shlokas, he changes his mind. Here, in verse 28, he uses them, the same durbuddhehe, as swajanam. After seeing his relatives, teachers, friends, Arjuna's attachment surfaces, leading to shoka and moha. And now he calls them swajanam, my people, ahankara and mamakara. Drushtvevam swajanam Krishna yuyutsum samupasthitam. That's what he says. Next question. Question 11. Verse 27 sees a change in Arjuna's personality indicated by the phrase paraya kripaya vishta. What does he convey? In this verse 27, paraya kripaya avishta, overpowered, avishta, with great paraya, compassion, emotion, attachment, kripaya, Arjuna's personality undergoes a sea change. He gives in to raga, leading to shoka and then moha. Transformation in Arjuna, as we see, angry Arjuna becoming a sorry Arjuna, rational Arjuna becoming an emotional Arjuna, and a soldier Arjuna turns into a samsari Arjuna. Gita Upadesha can only begin when Arjuna moves from a soldier to samsari and to become a disciple. Then Gita Upadesha begins. Next question. How do Jnanis and Ajnanis handle their emotions? Emotions will happen to everyone, but what is the difference in matter of handling this by Jnanis and Ajnanis? Jnani is a master of his emotions. Ajnani is a slave of his emotions, and that's why Ajnani suffers and Jnani doesn't suffer. Next question. What does Atatai means? Arjuna uses this word Atatai in one of his shlokas. In verse 36, Nihatya dhartarashtrannah ka pritis syad janardana papamevashtrayedasman nahatyevan atatayinaha. This is what Arjuna says. Here, Atatai means sinner, aggressor, criminal, terrorist. And more importantly, Atatai is referred to the person who has committed Pancha Mahapatakas. What are these? Burning others' houses, poisoning others, killing defenseless, stealing someone's property, stealing someone's wife. All these have been committed by Kauravas as we see Mahabharata story. Next question, sir. Question 14. What reasoning shows that Arjuna's intellect is clouded and he is in samsara? Arjuna is confused with dharma viveka. His dharma is yuddha and punishing the atatais. But now this very dharma yuddha he sees as adharmic and feels by killing or punishing the atatais he will incur sin. He also sees a kshatriya running from the battlefield as dharma now. A kshatriya taking up sannyasa. He lectures Krishna on this. And we'll come to the last question, 15. What, according to Arjuna, are the downsides of this war? What are the effects of this war? What is going to happen if the war takes place? Verse 38 to 44 speaks about these effects of war. Kulakshaya, annihilation of families, destruction of dynasty. Kuladharma nashte, destruction of family traditions. Adharma abhibhavet, increase of adharma. Kulakstriyah pradushyanti, women of the family becomes immoral, corrupt. Varna sankaraha, unwanted progeny, mixture of castes. Jati dharma utsidyante, destruction of social and welfare activities. This 15 questions will sum up the entire topic of Arjuna Vishada Yoga explained by Dr. Sundar. And with all these reasons, because of these reasons what Arjuna is feeling, now Arjuna says, and so Arjuna refusing to fight. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Venkatesh Prasad, for an excellent work. It takes a lot of time and a lot of patience to make such a series of question and answers. And it may look like, are we doing anything scholarly in the study of the Bhagavad Gita? Certainly not. It is like this. If something has to be studied properly, it is not just listening that will do. It requires making some notes, making some revision, because the scriptures are very loaded. And the more often you see it, you will see there is a greater depth. Additionally, if you are able to teach it to somebody, a greater amount of impact or greater amount of understanding happens. And that is the whole purpose of this exercise. As I already said, the Bhagavad Gita is only an excuse for us to do self-inquiry. So we will have two mirrors. One is the Tattva Bodha, the other is the Bhagavad Gita, held by teachers in different angles, so that we will be able to make an inquiry and to discover the real me, who is someone other than the body. The stories have a wonderful way to convey the truth. And in this context, it should be something relevant to the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. What greater story can we have than the story of the Bhagavad Gita, the story of the Mahabharata in this context? And therefore, the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita itself is today's story. How do we listen to this story? Whenever Sri Krishna is addressing Arjuna, Sri Krishna gives so many names to Arjuna, like Anaga, Arjuna, Bharata, Bharatarshaba, Dhananjaya, Dhanurdhara, Gudakesha, Kaunteya, Parantapa, Mahabhavo, Partha, Savyasachi. These are all not only Arjuna's names, but as students of Gita, they should be our names also. The moment your name is called out, suddenly we become alert. Now let all these become our names. And in the Gita, when you hear any of these names, let us become alert to the message of the Bhagavad Gita. And so that we have a deeper understanding that Sri Krishna is speaking to us directly through the words, through Arjuna, which is none other than ourselves. As I said earlier, every Friday we will be having the Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. In the next class, at the end of each chapter, we are looking into the Mundaka Upanishad. We will be studying 5 essential verses of the second chapter. And this is a very important part. Please come prepared. The next chapter will be the 12th chapter, and that will come on the subsequent Friday. So on Mondays, we will be having Disha sessions. On Friday, we will be having the Bhagavad Gita verse to verse. Venkatesh, please.
Thank you, friends. Hope you enjoyed the session. We will come back with Disha 2 on Monday, 28th of March, 2022. Coming Friday on 25th of March, we will continue study of Mundaka Upanishad, third part. Please log in by 6:45 p.m. on Friday. Hari Om. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavachishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om.